Welcome to the Smart Living Spaces vlog. I am Sharon, architectural and passive house designer. I'm also a homestay professional located here in New Zealand. It's my mission to make healthy, comfortable, energy efficient and affordable homes for everyday people. So come on a journey with me where I share my knowledge gained over the last couple of decades, because we aren't going to be building better if people don't understand and see the value in changing what we are creating. So this month I'm covering the 7 advantages of Homestar and why you should consider getting your new home designed to at least a Homestar 6. Next month I will cover an introduction into small smart spaces. This is the standardized design range from Smart Living Spaces that can be Passive House and Homestar certified. So last month I highlighted the 7 ways that Passive House fills the gaps in our New Zealand building code and hopefully explained where we need to improve our homes with regards to the 7 areas, namely ventilation, energy efficiency, overheating, internal moisture, air tightness and insulation. So to start off this vlog, I'm going to briefly explain how Homestar fits in with Passive House and the New Zealand building code, as most of our homes are simply designed to building code minimums, and I will explain the overlaps and differences because it's important to see how these work together. And then I will cover what Homestar is. So a breakdown of the various star ratings, the cost to build Homestar 6, important features or upgrades to each of the rating bands so you can understand where they sit with each other, the difference in power bills between the 5 different bands and compared to a co-compliant New Zealand home, the differences in mortgage costs and the differences in overheating. And then I will close off. So I have time-stamped the sections below, so if you want to skip to a certain section, you can easily go back, you can easily do that. So before we begin, if you like this content and want to be notified of when each new blog is published, please click the subscribe button. This helps grow the channel and gets the word on how to build better out there to a wider audience. Your support in my mission of creating healthy, comfortable and energy efficient homes for everyday people is very much appreciated. So let's dive in. To explain how the New Zealand Building Code, the Passive House Standard and Homestar Rating Tool interacts with each other, I've made this little graphic, and here's a Venn diagram showing the relationship between the Passive House Standard, Homestar and the New Zealand Building Code. So Homestar and Passive House both share energy efficiency and both can be used as a compliance pathway to the New Zealand Building Code. The sweet spot at the moment is ECO. You're going to hear that word a bit. ECO is the Energy Carbon Calculator for Homes. It's being developed by the New Zealand Green Building Council and it's based off a very simplified version of the Passive House Energy Calculator. It's energy modelling, which is an alternative pathway to H1 compliance, which is required under building law here in New Zealand. Now, our building code sets out the minimum requirements for building performance, including aspects like structural integrity, fire safety, and energy efficiency. It's a legal document. All building work is required to comply with the New Zealand Building Code. When people speak about code-compliant homes, that doesn't mean to say that you've necessarily got a quality home. It just simply means that what has been built and what has been consented is actually within the bounds of the legality of the building code. It's not a hallmark of quality, and I think it's really, really important for people to understand that. The building code uses various standards that engineers, architects, and architectural designers use to meet at least that legal minimum requirement. So there is a difference between a standard and the New Zealand Building Code. That's important because the Passive House is a standard. It's a voluntary international standard that focuses on achieving high energy efficiency with strict health and comfort criteria. It's designed based on calculations. You can get your home Passive House certified, which means an evaluation has been done at the design stage and then at the build stage to see if it meets that standard as determined by the Passive House Institute, which is in Germany, and they own the standard. Now, Homestar is a voluntary sustainability rating system for residential buildings in New Zealand, and it addresses energy efficiency, indoor comfort, and sustainable materials. It offers compliance with some of the building code requirements, but it also has requirements that are not covered by a building code. It uses energy modeling like Passive House does, and it offers cross credits with the Passive House. So a project can be code compliant, Homestar rated, and Passive House certified. A Passive House or Homestar rated home still requires code compliance with the New Zealand building code, but Passive House and Homestar can work independently of each other. So that's how they work independently of each other and also together. So what is Homestar? As I mentioned above, Homestar is a voluntary rating tool developed by the New Zealand Green Building Council, and it sits independently of the building code. And the New Zealand Green Building Council is part of the World Green Building Council network, and programs like Homestar exist in other countries. They just might not be called Homestar. It is the housing tool equivalent to Green Star. So if any of you have heard of Green Star rated buildings, Homestar is the home equivalent. So why consider this rating tool? Why consider Homestar for your project? Well, apart from having aspirations that go above the building code, Homestar also considers, recognises and rewards innovation and improvements in on-site ecology and stormwater management, occupant experience and sustainable amenities, waste consideration both during construction and occupation, low carbon materials in the design and construction, water use and human comfort and health in the design. This also flows into energy use rates, which impact on power bills, and water use rates, which will impact on your water bills. And Homestar is not a one size has to fit all. It can be applied to standalone homes, terrace homes, apartments, and even commercial buildings that have accommodation like assisted living apartments and retirement or health complexes. And it serves to sit between the world standards and aspirations, sort of on the energy side like Passive House, and just above the minimum legal standard level most homes in New Zealand adhere to, which is the minimum standards in our New Zealand Building Code. It requires the design to be evaluated and rated and a build rating achieved using evidence that was designed and credited to back up to show that it's actually been done. Like a building consent, it gets a design consent and then gets code compliance once it's done on the job. So there's a band of ratings called star ratings that recognize the level of improvement a design has. These star ratings are achieved by totaling the number of credit of a project that achieves with certain credits having mandatory minimums. And that means that we guarantee quality and integrity of the system. Here is a breakdown of the various star ratings. So there are 5 star ratings ranging from Homestar 6 up to Homestar 10. Each band, as I said, has a set of mandatory minimums that a project needs to meet in order to qualify for them. So you can't just accrue points randomly and take shortcuts. In addition to those mandatory minimums, each band has a minimum number of credits or points that it needs to achieve. So a Homestar 6 is awarded to a project that meets the Homestar 6 mandatory minimums and achieves 60 points or above. 7, 70 points, 8, 80 points, 10, 100 points. There are more than 130 credits or points to achieve, so there is flexibility for each type of project. Now, Homestar 6 and 7 I considered to be a good standard. They're definitely better than our building code. 8 and 9, best practice, and Homestar 10, world class. And while there are some increasing constraints for each rating, there are some fundamentals that set them apart from each other. So all Homestar rated projects need to be energy modeled. So there are caps on energy use, overheating, and heating demand that each band requires to meet with the performance of the design. And obviously the performance needs to improve as the rating increases. Homestar 6 and 7 go above the New Zealand Building Code because I'm benchmarking these against a minimum code compliant home, which is common, and as I constantly say, is the worst performing building legally allowed to be built. Both Homestar 6 and 7 consider ventilation and summer comfort to a better level than the code with better internal moisture control, and also consider outside of the building waste, water use, and embodied carbon of materials. Homestar 8 and above builds on 6 and 7, but also has better ventilation requirements, including air tightness requirements. The energy use and water caps are stricter, with the energy use getting sort of close to Passive House standards, definitely close to Passive House standards with Homestar 10, and energy use increasingly low, while winter and summer comfort, which is actually all year round comfort, is excellent. And site ecology, waste and water use is also more considered than for 6 and 7 levels. Now, obviously, there are improvements to buildings design, specification, and systems as you rise through the star ratings. So the cost to build Homestar 6. So mortgage calculations, and I will go into them a bit later, but I was actually going to do this at the end and I brought it up earlier. They're an indication of cost to build, and we do know that that's one of the biggest hurdles in our economic climate, and also the ability to borrow. So you will also see there'll be some calculations and power bills that Homestar 6 is actually a really good first step. But first of all, I wanted to give you a little bit of a comparison to a minimum code compliant house. The New Zealand Green Building Council has a detailed study on their website and that shows, research has shown that a Homestar 6 doesn't necessarily have to cost that much more than a code compliant standard bill. I will put a link in their findings in the description below, just adding to the list of homework you may or may not wish to create for yourself. But I'm going to err on the side of caution a little bit, and I'm going to put this into context by just comparing a base code compliant build to a Homestar 6 build of the same design. And for this, I'm going to say we're getting an ANZ Healthy Home Loan rate, which is available for any project that has a Homestar 6 rating as a minimum. I'm going to ignore design and consent fees because they do apply to both, and I'm going to add a sum to the Homestar 6 of 5K to cover the assessor and New Zealand Green Building audit fees, because they are specific to a Homestar project. So if we say our code compliant build cost is 240,000, I'm going on 4,000 a square metre for a 60 square metre dwelling, and our Homestar 6 build cost is 2% more plus certification fees, that makes it 249,800 for this little 60 square metre. This is a little one of the small smart spaces. Now, that doesn't include resource con fees or development contributions, as there are those scenarios would be the same, because they would be unique to the site. So we want to narrow this down as to how we're comparing apples with apples. So the mortgage amount for a code minimum version of this design at an assumed 6% interest rate over 30-year terms is a total monthly repayment of $1,439 a month. So now if we look at a Homestar 6 version of this, including certification fees, which are additional, but also taking into account the interest reduction of ANZ's Healthy Home Loan, which gives us, ANZ has a Healthy Home Loan rate that offers 0.7% interest reduction on a fixed home loan rate with a Homestar 6 or above project, and 1% interest reduction on the floating interest loan rate. But we're just going to focus on the fixed interest loan rate for the moment. And if we take the comparable project value at 249,800 with a 5.3 interest rate over 30 years, our monthly repayments are $1,388. So the difference between those two is you are paying $1,439 for a less quality, more uncomfortable, and more power-hungry design compared to a elevated design in terms of quality, lower power bills, but a higher build cost, a slightly higher build cost. But you've got a mortgage repayment that's lower. So that's a lower interest repayment, better quality home that is recognised with a rating system. So if you're selling your house, you've got brag rights, and lower power bills, which you'll see in a bit. So suddenly that building better costs more gets a little less convincing, doesn't it? So if you do nothing more than Homestar 6, which is just above our building code, you can key into ways of building better and investing better. And because our homes are our greatest financial assets, we spend most of our lives securing. It's not about working hard, it's about choosing smarter. So important features or upgrades to each rating band are as follows. So Homestar 6 starts with very similar insulation levels as a minimum code compliant home. Because it is energy modeled, the insulation levels will probably not align with the generic values our building code uses, and I'm referring to the schedule method, which is a tick box method. There are mandatory caps relating to summer and winter comfort levels, so space heating demand, that is your winter heating bills, and overheating, which is summer comfort. What that means is those caps are on how much power a design can use for each of those to warm your house or to cool your house. So this reduces your power bills. 6 and 7 require a minimum of one thermal break, primarily in the form of thermally broken windows and slab edge insulation. Also, internal surfaces need to meet healthy levels to avoid condensation on these surfaces and therefore discourage the formation of mold. We are aiming for healthy homes. Cold surfaces in a home have the ability to have condensation form on them. And ventilation is a big one. So increased intermittent ventilation, which is more than just range hoods and bathroom extracts, which our code requires. So overheating needs to be considered and achieved with better insulation rates, window shades, good window orientation, and considered sizes. We want all year-round comfort for you. There are also caps on water use, so specifying lower flow taps and fixtures that needs to be considered and it brings down your water bill. When we get to Homestar 8, we see a shift in building performance. So insulation is increased to better levels. The ventilation systems step up and become balanced, so they don't just rely on extracting air, but they also allow for heat to be recycled back into the home. And ventilation rates are better controlled. If you have uncontrolled ventilation rates, you have uncontrolled heat loss. Together, this reduces your winter heating bills. Air tightness layers, which are required to protect your home structure of any internal damage. It's good practice to do them. It's not legally required. And Homestar 8 calls for that as a minimum. Improvements in the design also need to be made to achieve excellent winter and summer comfort. And of course, there are those caps on the energy use so that they become lower and lower, the higher the rating. So as you go up, your power bills are going to be coming down. Water use rates are reduced even further. So that's reducing your water bill and also reducing the demand of water in our drier months that we're experiencing here in New Zealand. So the differences in power bills, as I mentioned, there's energy caps to each of the Homestar levels. I'm going to show you the difference in power bills for a code compliant home, Homestar 6, Homestar 8, and Homestar 10 version of the same design, so you can get an idea of the differences between all of them and in terms of amount. So in order to do this, I took this design. This is a standard small smart space design from Smart Living Spaces, and I calculated the overall energy use according to each of these ratings above the caps that they have to reach. Now, obviously, our building code doesn't have a cap, so it just is what it is, whatever the design creates. So to provide some constraints to create a comparison, I've applied a kilowatt hour cost of 30 cents. This is just to take into account the difference in the energy rates on your power bill, because we have controlled in any time, and also to compensate for the line rental, which mine's just gone up from $1.20 a day to $1.50. So these projects are in Auckland, so that the modelling actually relates to the climatic conditions in that area, and the floor plan area is 60 square metres. So it's a pretty low energy design already, and the comfort zone for the temperatures for all of them are between 20 and 25 degrees Celsius. Now, remember, this is a calculation in real time. Our electricity prices are going to increase and possibly exaggerate these calculations. So here is the minimum standard created by our building code that are legally required to build. Remember, when we adhere to these minimums, we are creating the worst performing building legally allowed. And these figures have been taken from ECO, which is the energy and carbon calculator for homes from the New Zealand Green Building Council. All of these energy calculations have been done in ECO. So the energy use for a code compliant home is 88.1 plus 85.7, which equals 173.8 kilowatt hours per square meter per year. At 30 cents a kilowatt hour for 60 square meters, that means an annual power bill of $3,128.40, or on average, $260.70 a month. So this is to keep that minimum design at comfortable levels between 20 and 25 degrees Celsius. Now, I do realize that people compromise their health in order to reduce power use. You might tolerate it being a little bit hotter than 25 degrees Celsius, or you might just put a jumper on in winter and or go stay with friends. So how does this compare to a small step up to Homestar 6, which we already know gives us a lower monthly mortgage repayment, and we know it is a good standard. It's above the minimum standard. So with a total energy use of 92 kilowatt hours per square meter annum, that gives us an annual power bill of $1,242. On average, that monthly power bill has gone from that $260 of the minimum code compliant to $103.50. So we've more than halved it. We have reduced the power use by a significant amount, and we've ensured better comfort, and as we've also established, lower mortgage repayments. So now, what does this look like for a Homestar 8? So is the leap, because as I said, the jump to Homestar is quite significant, is the leap worth it? So the maximum amount of power that a Homestar 8 design can use is 51 kilowatt hours per square meter annum. So that means that an annual power bill for this particular design of $918. So that's an average monthly power bill of $76.50. So we've reduced it by 75% over a Homestar 6. And we also have improved health and comfort. That's just shy of $100 less than a minimum code compliant version. Got something to think about. And if you're really into achieving world standards, if we're going to calculate this for Homestar 10, that would give us an average monthly power bill of $52.50. So that is a fifth of a minimum code compliant building code version of this design. So as you can see, the step from code minimum to Homestar 6 really is worth it, considering the benefits. Also, it's really worth it in terms of the fact that you're not increasing your mortgage significantly, but it gives you benefits in terms of comfort, but also affordable power bills, and later on you'll see water bills as well. Now, I am anticipating the next question that you're going to have, where you say, yeah, that's great, but how much does it actually cost to build a Homestar 6 or a Homestar 8 or a Homestar 10? So we're going to dive into those calculations in a bit. So the differences to build minimum code compliant Homestar 6, Homestar 8, and Homestar 10. The real reason that people ask what's the difference in cost, well, there's three reasons actually. One is, how much do you need to borrow, because you need to assess whether this is whether it's worth dreaming about, and obviously we have a limit based on our incomes as to how much we can borrow. Also, you want to know what your monthly repayments are going to be, because on top of being able to borrow, you also have to live every paycheck to paycheck or month to month, and you still have to pay other bills. And then the third question that people ask is, how long is it going to take me to pay this thing off? Because we want to pay our mortgage off faster. Really, that's how we get financial security. So to keep it simple, I'm going to work to these constraints. I am going to assume a 6% interest rate. I'm going to assume a 30-year term. And we are going to be calculating this with minimum repayments. I'm also not factoring in a deposit, because that just means that the results become a little bit more arduous. I'm not factoring in for changing interest rates, because otherwise they get super complicated, and that's not the purpose of this exercise. And I've used sorted.org.nz, their calculators. So if you want to take these numbers and put it into it yourself and play around with them, please by all means do so. And play around with the terms and the interest rates and the volumes to build. As I said earlier, I've used $4,000 as a base square meter rate. These are quite hard to quantify. I've assumed Auckland, and I've also assumed that it includes GST. I had a long chat to a builder who recommended that would be a safe value to use. Also, smaller buildings have higher square meter rates. I've done a blog on this. I will put a link in the description box below. So they really are a theoretical calculation. Obviously, your home and your design needs to be costed with construction drawings in order to assess how much it's going to cost. So let's just try and make some generic assumptions that aren't unreasonable. Let's say our base build for 60 square meters in Auckland would cost $240,000, 60 square meter. Maybe that's your minor dwelling that you're going to put out the back. And let's just have a play at it this way. Say the cost increases by 2% for Homestar 6, 5% for Homestar 8, and 10% for Homestar 10. Passive house tends to cost loosely between 5 and 10%, so I've kind of gone to the upper end of it to cover it. Also, because it's such a small dwelling at 60 square meters, I want to know that we're kind of factoring up enough variance. A Homestar 6 build would cost you $244,800 for the monthly power bill of almost half that of a healthy, of a code compliant home. Homestar 8 build would cost you $252,000, and a Homestar 10 would cost you $264,000, with a fifth of the power bills that you get with a minimum code compliant. So assuming no deposit, what would your monthly mortgage repayments be? So a minimum legal standard home, that $240,000 loan would give you $1,439 monthly mortgage repayments. Homestar 6 with the 0.7% reduction, because remember it qualifies for the ANZ loan, $1,360. Homestar 8, again with a 0.7% reduction, $1,400. And Homestar 10 with a 0.7% reduction, $1,469. So suddenly Homestar 10 is actually not that much more than a base minimum code compliant home in terms of mortgage repayments. And so from a rental perspective, that could also look doable if you're looking at a small 60 square meter investment property. The whole point of this exercise is to break the perception that building better costs way more, and that is simply outside the reach of your means. That tends to be an exaggerated story that stands in the way of us getting better. And these repayments don't consider the savings in the power bills, which could help you pay off your loan faster, and it doesn't consider the certification fees, but they'll be about $5,000. But if you tune in for next month, I will explain small smart spaces to you and how that offers you savings in the design, consent, and certification fees for Homestar and Passive House, and for building consent as well. Right, the differences in overheating. So I've separated this out from heating because we all pay winter power bills. And our code somewhat addresses winter comfort. So we've got a tangible resonance about what our winter heating is, even though our code does address winter comfort very, very poorly, just with insulation. But overheating is something that, because it's not a code minimizing requirement, it's silently gets created for the homeowner or occupant. And once you've got a house that overheats, you're kind of stuck with the problem. It's very hard to mitigate. So it's a rather hot topic, and certainly should be after the summers we're starting to experience. So I have taken overheating percentages, which you can get out of energy modeling, from this standard design from Small Smart Spaces, this little 60 square meter design, and I've evaluated against code minimums against a Homestar 6, Homestar 8, and Homestar 10 version of this design. Now, there are added features from 6 and above, and that is shading mechanisms, because that is what's required for Homestar. It's not required under our building code. So there are additional elements too, in terms of insulation, better windows, and improved ventilation systems because of the steps in the Homestar. But the biggest step between our code compliant home and the Homestar 6 is that those windows have good shading systems in the form of an adjustable louver system. That is a big part in addressing overheating, is external shading. I'm not talking about eaves, I'm not talking about overheads, I'm talking about purposely adjustable shading elements that we can change, particularly between spring and autumn. The code minimum version of this design overheated 26.6%, of which is above 25 degrees Celsius. So that's because we only overheat during the day. That would mean we don't overheat at night, that because the sun doesn't shine. That's roughly 6 months of the year that we overheat above 25 degrees Celsius for the code compliant home. I haven't calculated how much above 25 degrees Celsius would go, but logic would say that a Homestar rated would not go above 25 as much as a minimum code compliant house. Homestar 6 version of this, above 25 degrees with no mechanical cooling, is 15.9%. Roughly that equates to 4 months of the year. Still not fabulous, but remember this is slightly above minimum code standard, and that's a reduction from 3 months. It's a reduction of 2 months. The Homestar 8 version, this reduces down to 14.9%, which again is about 3 months. This isn't a calculation of how hot it's going to get, but as I said, my logic tells me that the maximum temperatures reached will be less in a Homestar 6 than a minimum code compliant, and less in a Homestar 8 because of the improved systems. Now, the Homestar 10 version this one sits just above 10%. Passive House calls for a maximum of 10%, so we're a slight fail there on the Passive House level, but that's just over a couple of months of the year. And so those are the days that you're going to have to spend power on actively cooling your design. But you can also boost your ventilation system, which will help remove some of the hot air a bit faster, and be mindful of shading, and maybe using an air conditioner if you get much above 25 degrees, or depending upon how much above 25 degrees it actually gets. So to close off, most of our homes, particularly ones built by housing companies, are built to the minimum standard of the building code, with cost often being the reason to keep it there. However, when we consider the cost of living in a space, cooling it, heating it, when we take into consideration the cost of the mortgage, when we take into consideration the cost of the comfort to the occupants and the health, it's a different story. So when you have your home designed and certified to Homestar, not only can you get a home that is designed for lower power bills and better health and comfort than the building code actually calls for, you can also get reductions on your home loan rates, meaning less in mortgage repayments, and you pay less in power bills. And if you're paying a water bill with the low flow fittings, your water bill will come down. Those are expensive if you're stuck with them after you've finished your building and you haven't actually factored them into the design, and you've only got expensive remedies to try and solve those problems. The cheapest place to create value, comfort, and low power bills is really at the design stage. And yes, building better does cost more in terms of what you have to borrow. although Homestar 6 doesn't need to cost much more than a code-compliant home. But in the grand scheme of things, there's actually benefits that make it more affordable. There are changes coming to banking criteria to be more aligned with climate change and the cost of living being centre stage. So with the rise in recognition of building better by rating tools like Homestar and Greenstar, these systems already are in place and they can be used to create assurance, not only for the credits, the carbon aspirations of banks, but also for the reality, for the practicality of paying your bills and surviving every month. I do think we'll see the old way of doing things diminish, and our homes are the biggest financial investment we make in our lifetimes. We invest our funds into investments with so much more careful consideration, often using a broker or advisor for our decisions. And so the aspirations and the decisions we make around our home should be no different. How valuable and desirable will your home be after 2030? My uncle, a very smart lawyer, always used to say to me, your home is only worth what someone is prepared to pay for it. So when a home becomes too affordable to live in, how valuable and attractive will that be to potential vendors? If that home becomes harder to get mortgage lending on it, how attractive will that be to vendors? So I hope that helps you understand Homestar and how it can benefit for you. I hope it explains exactly what it is and give you an insight to how beneficial it can be for you. So next month, I will be introducing you to Small Smart Spaces. This is the standardized design range that I've developed that can be Passive House and Homestar certified, creating a very streamlined process that's not the traditional architectural route to make building better, achievable, affordable, and also much more timely. The links to the Homestar report by the New Zealand Green Building Council on cost is in the description below. And lastly, to prepare you for the next vlog, here is the link to the shop of Small Smart Spaces. You are welcome to follow me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, or LinkedIn. Links to get daily snippets are below. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you choose to sign up for this monthly vlog, you can get the next one delivered direct to your inbox. I will put the link to sign up for that in the description box below. So lastly, for those of you still here, thank you. I appreciate your attention and focus, and I will see you next time.